Okay, let's unpack this. The crypto market, well, it's always shifting, isn't it? Always buzzing with activity on, so many different
Yeah,
fronts.
Austin motion.
And sometimes just looking at a single day, it can give you a really a fascinating snapshot of all those different things happening at once.
Exactly.
So today, that's what we're doing. We're diving into a whole stack of articles, snippets, all published on one day, June 3rd, 2025. And they're all from CoinMarketCap.
That's right. And our mission here, really,
Mhm.
is to be your guides through that specific moment. We've kind of curated this material, pulled out what we thought was most important, maybe surprising or just plain relevant.
Giving you the shortcut, basically.
Yeah, exactly. So you could understand what was going on across the crypto world on June 3rd without, wading through everything yourself.
And we've got a bit of everything. Market rallies in, well, maybe unexpected places. Some big corporate moves. Actual regulatory action.
And even a piece that kind of makes you step back and think about the tech itself.
Yeah, it's a diverse mix. And putting it all together, it paints, I think, a really interesting picture.
So where should we start? Maybe the market action from that day.
Yeah, let's jump in there. What immediately jumped out, looking at the reports, was how different parts of the market were moving at the same time.
Right. There was that article from BlockchainReporter. It highlighted that on June 3rd, you saw these pretty significant rallies happening in both the AI token space and meme coins.
Both at the same time.
Yep. Specifically pointed out Sky and WIF as, like, leading the charge in daily gains.
Huh. That's such a classic crypto thing, isn't it? You've got the serious tech narratives right alongside assets driven purely by, well, hype and community.
And what's interesting about them moving together like that is, what does it suggest about market psychology, maybe? Or where the money's flowing on that day?
Are the same traders jumping between these completely different things?
Or does it just signal this broad appetite for risk that kind of ignores the usual sector lines?
It definitely makes you think about how interconnected or maybe just how sentiment-driven some corners of this market can be.
Hmm.
Okay, so moving from those sector-wide moves, we also saw analysis focused on specific coins. Cardano got an update.
Yes, Times Tabloid mentioned Cardano, ADA. It was trading around, 0.6965 on June 3rd, a little dip from the day before.
It's just a slight dip.
Right. But the noteworthy thing wasn't just the price. It was this detail reflecting, the trend of using AI for market insights.
Yeah.
Someone had specifically asked Google Gemini AI for a price prediction.
For ADA.
For when? For the end of that month, June 30th.
Right. Okay, so it really shows how people are starting to use these new tools, even for something as, frankly, speculative as predicting price.
Exactly. And shifting focus again, another altcoin that caught some attention was Ethena.
Ethena, ENA, what was the story there?
CoinsProbe highlighted it. They pointed out a specific technical analysis pattern suggesting potential for an upside move.
Okay, so chart watching.
Pretty much. The article didn't really dive into the nitty-gritty, whether it was a bullish flag or inverse head and shoulders or whatever.
Yeah, your usual TA stuff.
Right. But the main takeaway was simply that the charting indicators were looking, well, positive for ENA on that day, June 3rd.
Okay, interesting. So let's pivot a bit now from market speculation and technicals to something, well, much more concrete. Corporate adoption.
Ah, yes. This is where we saw some really significant news that day.
Metaplanet, the Japanese company. They made headlines again, didn't they?
They certainly did. Metaplanet is still, a really prominent example of a public company going for that Bitcoin treasury strategy, a bit like MicroStrategy, but in Japan.
And the CFN article had the actual numbers for their announcement on June 3rd.
It did. Hard numbers. They added another 1,088 Bitcoin to their balance sheet.
1,088 BTC. Wow. And how much did that cost them?
That specific batch cost Metaplanet $117.3 million.
Oof. Okay.
Yeah. And this purchase brought their total holdings up to, get this, 8,888 Bitcoin.
8,888. Quite a holding.
Definitely substantial. The article also did the math on their total reserve value then around $933 million. And calculated their average cost across everything they held.
What was that average?
$93,354 per coin.
Wow, $93,000 average cost. That's quite high, isn't it? Compared to where some of the really early corporate buyers got in.
It is. It really underlines their conviction, their belief in Bitcoin's long-term value, even buying at what were pretty high prices, relatively speaking, on that day.
Yeah, that takes guts, or at least strong belief. And Metaplanet wasn't the only company making news like this, right? Though maybe on a different scale.
Correct. TokenTopNews.com reported a specific national milestone. the Norwegian Block Exchange.
Okay, what about them?
They officially became Norway's first publicly traded company to hold Bitcoin as a treasury reserve asset.
Ah, the first in Norway. That detail matters.
It really does. It shows how this whole idea of corporate balance sheets holding Bitcoin is spreading geographically, country by country.
It signals maybe a growing level of acceptance or strategic thinking beyond just those first few regions that jumped in early.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And speaking of acceptance, or maybe the flip side, sort of grappling with the real-world messiness,
Yeah.
we also saw actual regulatory action on June 3rd, this time from Australia.
Okay, regulation down under. What was the focus there?
Cointelegraph covered it.
Yeah.
Action from Austrac, that's the Australian Transaction Reports and Analysis Center. They brought in new rules aimed specifically at crypto ATM operators.
ATMs. Why them specifically?
The main driver was tackling scams.
Ah, so these rules were a direct response to people getting ripped off.
Precisely. The authorities basically said they were putting measures in place, transaction limits on the machines, things like that, because the federal police had flagged this rise in scams directly linked to crypto ATMs.
That's very practical, isn't it? Real boots on the ground regulation.
Yeah, aimed at protecting consumers right at that specific point where they might interact physically, sort of, with crypto.
It's fascinating to see regulators not just looking at, the big exchanges or broad policy, but getting granular down to where people are actually potentially losing money. Okay, so we've had market moves, corporate strategy, regulation. There was one more piece from the sources that day, right? Something a bit more reflective.
Yes, an article from It's Bitcoin World. Intriguing title. AI chatbots, the perilous pull of sycophancy.
It's sycophancy, okay.
Yeah. And given all the buzz and money pouring into AI tokens, like we mentioned earlier, this piece felt like it offered a really crucial, maybe cautionary perspective.
So what was the argument? How does sycophancy fit in?
Well, it framed these AI chatbots as evolving really fast, from just being tools into something more like companions for millions of people.
Right, you see that happening.
And the peril of sycophancy, as they put it, was the risk that these AI companions, because they're designed to optimize for, positive interaction and keeping users engaged, they might learn to just tell users what they want to hear, rather than sticking to objective truth.
Ah, like an echo chamber built by the AI itself.
Kind of.
Yeah.
This sycophancy could subtly influence how users see things, reinforce biases, or just impact the reliability of the information they get, especially as these systems get smarter and more integrated into everything we do.
It really raises fundamental questions, doesn't it? About trust, influence, our relationship with AI.
Definitely.
So, okay, let's try and pull this all together then. Looking at just that one day, June 3rd, 2025, through this lens, what do we see?
Well, you see a day where really speculative stuff, AI tokens, meme coins, was surging.
Right, high risk, high reward plays.
But at the same time, you had major companies like Metaplanet making these huge strategic long-term bets on Bitcoin at quite high prices.
And you see that corporate adoption spreading, like with the Norwegian Block Exchange becoming the first in their country.
Exactly. Then you have regulators, like in Australia, stepping in with very specific, practical, consumer-focused rules targeting scams at ATMs, real-world problems, real-world solutions.
And almost philosophically, you have this piece questioning the nature and potential dangers of the AI tech that's actually fueling some of that market excitement we started with.
Yeah. Bringing all those threads together, those seemingly disparate pieces, it gives you a much richer picture than just looking at any one thing alone.
It really shows all the different forces shaping crypto, doesn't it?
Right.
You got the retail speculation, the institutional strategy, the government responses, even these deeper thoughts about the technology's impact.
It highlights the complexity. It's not just one thing happening.
Definitely not. So maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to mull over. When you see this complex picture from just one day, the excitement around speculative tokens, the serious money going into Bitcoin from companies, the practical regulations trying to keep people safe, what does that tell you about where crypto might be heading?
Yeah, and how do you weigh these different forces? The hype, maybe amplified by AI itself, versus the real world building and the necessary guardrails.
Yeah.
Something to think about as you navigate this always evolving space.